You are nothing. The words echoed through the ceremonial grounds, cold and final, spoken by Elder Moira with the same tone one might use to discuss the weather. Ilara stood at the edge of the sacred circle, her hands clasped before her head bowed not in submission, but in habit. Years of being invisible had taught her how to make herself smaller, quieter, less present. She had perfected the art of disappearing while still standing in plain sight. The other pack members barely glanced at her as they took their positions for the ritual, their wolves stirring beneath their skin with anticipation and power. She felt nothing. No pull, no presence, no beast waiting to emerge. Just the hollow emptiness that had defined her existence for 23 years. She should not even be here, someone muttered. And Ilara did not need to look to know it was Cassandra, the Beta's daughter, beautiful and cruel in equal measure. A wolfless Omega contaminating a sacred ritual. It is an insult to the ancestors. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered lichens, but Elder Moira raised one gnarled hand for silence. The ritual requires 49 participants. We have 48. She will stand in the outer ring where her weakness cannot interfere with the true warriors. The dismissal in those words cut deeper than outright cruelty ever could. Ilara took her assigned position at the furthest edge of the circle, so far from the center that she could barely see the ancient stone altar where Alpha King Kieran would perform the awakening ceremony. The Alpha King. Even thinking his name sent a complicated tangle of emotions through her chest. Kieran Blackwood, ruler of the 7 united packs, the strongest lichen alive, and completely unaware of her existence, despite the fact that she had lived in his territory her entire life. She had seen him only twice before, both times from a distance so great he had been little more than a figure of power and authority. He was here, now because the war had come to their borders. The creatures from the Shadowlands, ancient things that should have remained in legend, had begun crossing into lichen territory. Villages burned, packs scattered. The old treaties that had kept the peace for 1,000 years had shattered like glass, and no one knew why. The ritual was supposed to awaken the old protections, the wards that the first lichens had placed around their territories when they had defeated the Shadowlands the last time. But those protections required power, blood, and sacrifice. 49 lichens forming the sacred circle, their combined strength channeled through the Alpha King, who would offer his blood to the earth and call forth the guardians that slept beneath stone and root. Ilara understood why she had been chosen to complete the number. If something went wrong, if the ritual demanded more than expected, better to lose an Omega without a wolf than someone who actually mattered. She had made peace with her own disposability long ago. The drums began, deep and resonant, a rhythm that seemed to come from the earth itself. The pack members around the circle began to chant in the old language, words that Ilara did not understand, but that made her bones ache with recognition anyway. She joined the chant phonetically, her voice so soft it disappeared into the greater sound, just another meaningless addition to something far larger than herself. Alpha King Kieran stepped into the center of the circle, and even from this distance, Ilara could feel the power radiating from him. He was tall, built like a warrior who had earned every scar, his dark hair pulled back from a face that was handsome in a harsh, uncompromising way. His eyes were the gold of his wolf, and they swept across the assembled pack members with an intensity that made even the strongest warriors straighten their spines. His gaze never reached her. She was too far, too insignificant, too nothing. Elder Moira handed him the ceremonial blade, a weapon so old that its metal had turned black with age and magic. Kieran did not hesitate. He drew the blade across his palm, and his blood fell onto the altar stone, crimson against ancient gray. The drums grew louder. The chanting intensified. Ilara felt something shift in the air, a pressure building like the moment before a storm breaks. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and for a brief, wild moment, she thought perhaps the ritual was working. that the old guardians would rise and drive back the darkness threatening them all. Then the earth split open, not at the altar, but 50 yards beyond the circle, at the edge of the forbidden forest where even the bravest warriors did not venture. The sound was like a mountain breaking in half, a deep, grinding roar that made Alara's teeth ache and her ears ring. The chanting stopped abruptly. The drums fell silent. Every lichen in the circle turned toward the forest, and what emerged from the darkness made Alara's breath catch in her throat. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest lichen in wolf form, but it was not a wolf. Its body was covered in armor that looked like it had been forged from shadow and bone, plates that shifted and moved with liquid grace. Its head was shaped like a wolf's but elongated, almost serpentine, with horns that curved back like a crown. Its eyes glowed with a silver light so intense it hurt to look at directly. A war creature. Alara had heard the stories, the legends whispered by elders late at night, when they thought no one was listening. The first lichens had created them during the original war with the Shadowlands, bonding the souls of fallen warriors with elemental magic to create guardians that could not be killed, could not be corrupted, could not be stopped. But those creatures had disappeared after the war ended, sleeping beneath the earth until they were needed again. No one had seen one in over 1,000 years. No one had believed they were real. The creature moved forward with a grace that belied its size, each step deliberate and purposeful. Pack members scrambled backward, some shifting into their wolves out of pure instinct, others frozen in place by fear or awe or both. Alpha King Kieran stepped forward, his wolf rising in his eyes, his power filling the space around him like a physical force. "I am Kieran Blackwood, Alpha King of the 7 Packs, and I summoned you in the name of the first lichens to defend our lands, against the darkness rising in the Shadowlands." His voice carried absolute authority, the kind of command that made even other alphas bow their heads. The war creature paused. Its massive head swung toward Kieran, and for a moment, Alara thought it would acknowledge him, would accept his command as it should. Then it turned away. It walked past the Alpha King as if he were not there. It walked past Elder Moira, past the strongest warriors, past Cassandra who was still in her wolf form and, snarling with confused aggression, it walked toward Alara. She could not move. Her feet had rooted themselves to the ground, her body locked in place by a terror so complete it felt like drowning. The creature crossed the sacred circle, breaking the formation that had taken hours to arrange, scattering lichens like leaves before a storm. No one tried to stop it. No one dared. It stopped 3 feet in front of her, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from its armored body, could smell something like ozone and ancient earth. Then, slowly, deliberately, the war creature lowered its massive head. The horns that had seemed so threatening dipped toward the ground in a gesture of unmistakable submission. Its glowing silver eyes closed, and a low sound rumbled from deep in its chest. Not a growl, but something almost like a purr, a sound of recognition and devotion. Alara forgot how to breathe. The silence that followed was absolute, so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat, thundering in her ears. Every eye in the clearing was on her now, on the Nothing Omega who suddenly had a legendary war creature bowing before her like she was its queen. "Impossible," Elder Moira whispered, but her voice carried in the stillness. Only those of the royal bloodline can command the war creatures, only those descended directly from the first Alpha. Kieran was moving toward her now, and there was something in his expression that Alara could not read. Something between shock and recognition and a hunger so intense it made her take an instinctive step backward. But there was nowhere to go. The war creature was in front of her, and behind her was only the forest, dark and deep and full of things that would kill her far more quickly than whatever was about to happen here. "What is your name?" The Alpha King's voice was rough, scraped raw by whatever he was feeling. Alara tried to speak, and found her throat had closed. She swallowed hard, forced the words out. Ilara. Ilara. Frost. The name felt strange on her tongue, as if by speaking it in this moment, in front of this audience, she was claiming something she had no right to. Kieran stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists as if he was fighting the urge to reach for her. Frost, he repeated, and there was something in the way he said it that made it sound like a revelation. The Frost line was thought to be extinct. They were the personal guards of the first Alpha, his most trusted warriors, the keepers of the royal blood through the maternal line. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Ilara shook her head, the movement jerky and desperate. You are wrong. I am nobody. I have no wolf. I have no power. I am just... She trailed off because she did not know how to finish that sentence. What? Was she? An Omega? A servant? A mistake? Kieran's gaze moved from her face to the war creature still bowing before her, then back to her. The war creatures were created to protect the royal bloodline, and only the royal bloodline. They cannot be commanded or fooled or deceived. If it has chosen you, then you carry the blood it was designed to serve. He took another step closer, and this time Ilara did step back, her spine hitting the armored shoulder of the war creature behind her. The creature did not move, did not threaten, but its presence was solid and immovable, a wall of protection whether she wanted it or not. I do not understand, Ilara said, and she hated how small her voice sounded, how weak. My parents were Omegas. They died when I was young. I have lived in this pack my entire life. If I were special, if I were important, someone would have known. Kieran's jaw tightened. Or someone did know, and worked very hard to make sure you never discovered what you were. Before, Ilara could process that. Before she could even begin to untangle what it meant, Cassandra's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. This is ridiculous. She is trying to manipulate us all. She probably has some spell, some trick. We should kill the creature and be done with it. Several lichens growled agreement, their wolves rising, their eyes bleeding to gold. The war creature responded instantly. It raised its head, and the sound that came from its throat was nothing like the gentle purr it had offered Ilara. This was a roar that shook the ground, that sent birds exploding from the trees, that made every lichen in the clearing drop to their knees in submission, whether they wanted to or not. Everyone except Kieran. He remained standing, his power pushing back against the creature's dominance in a battle of wills that made the air between them crackle with energy. Enough, he commanded, and his voice carried the weight of an alpha king, a ruler who had earned his crown through strength and cunning and sheer force of will. The creature has made its choice. We will not question it. We will not attack it. And we will discover the truth of what this means. He turned back to Ilara, and this time when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that made her chest tight and her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with fear. You will come with me. You will stay in the royal compound where you can be protected, and where we can begin to unravel this mystery. Ilara wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to return to the safety of invisibility. But she could feel the war creature behind her, its massive presence a reminder that her life had changed irrevocably in the span of heartbeats. She could feel the eyes of the pack on her, hostile and confused and afraid. And she could feel something else, something she had never felt before. A pull toward the Alpha King that was so strong it was almost painful. Like a hook, had been set in her chest and was drawing her toward him whether she wanted to go or not. I do not have a choice, do I? She asked quietly. Kieran's expression softened slightly, just enough to show that beneath the commanding king was something more human, more conflicted. You always have a choice, but some choices are safer than others. And right now, you have more enemies than you realize. He was right. She could see it in the faces around her. The shock turning to resentment. The fear turning to anger. She had disrupted their ritual, stolen their thunder, proven that their hierarchy was built on foundations far more fragile than they wanted to believe. If she stayed in the pack as an Omega now, after this, they would tear her apart. Slowly, carefully, Alara nodded. I will go with you. Kieran held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, his grip firm but not crushing. The moment their skin touched, something electric shot through her, so intense that she gasped and nearly pulled away. But Kieran held on, his eyes widening slightly as if he had felt it too. The mate bond. Alara had heard of it, the sacred connection between two wolves that was supposed to be rare and precious and unbreakable. But she did not have a wolf. She should not be able to feel it. And yet there it was, undeniable and terrifying and absolutely impossible. From the expression on Kieran's face, he felt it too. His jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. And for a moment, something almost like pain crossed his features before he locked it away behind the mask of a king. We leave now, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Gather whatever belongings you need. You have 5 minutes. Alara did not have belongings. Everything she owned could fit in a single worn bag, and most of it was not worth keeping. But she nodded and turned toward the pack's living quarters, acutely aware of the war creature following her like an enormous, armored shadow. The other pack members scattered before them, none willing to get close to either the creature or the Omega who commanded it. Her room was barely larger than a closet, a small space beneath the stairs where servants and Omegas were housed. She had never minded it before. It was private, quiet, a place where she could be alone with her thoughts. Now it felt suffocating, a reminder of everything she had been, everything she was supposed to remain. She grabbed her bag and shoved in the few items that mattered. A photograph of her parents that she barely remembered. A book of old stories that she had read so many times the pages were falling out. A blanket that was more patches than original fabric. It took less than 2 minutes. When she emerged, Kieran was waiting, flanked by 2 of his royal guards, massive lichens who watched her with expressions carefully neutral. The war creature had positioned itself beside the door, and when Alara appeared, it fell into step beside her as if it had been doing so for years rather than minutes. The walk to the vehicles felt like a funeral march. Pack members lined the path, silent and staring, their emotions radiating off them in waves. Fear, anger, resentment, confusion. Alara kept her eyes forward, her chin up, even as her hands shook and her heart raced. She had spent her life trying to be invisible, and now she was the center of attention in the worst possible way. Cassandra stepped into their path, her perfect face twisted with contempt. You think you have won something, she hissed, her voice low enough that only Alara could hear. You think because some monster bowed to you that you are suddenly important. But you are still nothing. You are still weak. And when everyone realizes you are just a fraud with a lucky trick, I will be there to watch you fall. Alara should have been afraid, should have stayed silent as she always did. But something had changed in her, something fundamental and irreversible. She met Cassandra's gaze without flinching. If I am nothing, then you have nothing to fear from me, she said quietly. But if I am something, then you should be very careful how you speak to me. The war creature rumbled a warning, and Cassandra stumbled backward, her face going pale. Kieran's hand settled on Alara's shoulder, a touch that was both possessive and protective. Move, he commanded, and Cassandra had no choice but to obey, stepping aside as they passed. The SUV was black and armored, built for war rather than comfort. Alara climbed into the back seat, and to her surprise, the war creature began to shimmer, its form condensing and shifting until it was no larger than a wolf, small enough to leap into the vehicle and curl at her feet. Its eyes still glowed silver, and its armor still looked deadly, but at least it fit. Kieran slid into the seat beside her rather than up front with the driver, close enough that his thigh pressed against hers. "We need to talk," he said as the vehicle began to move, pulling away from the only home Alara had ever known. "About what you felt when we touched, about what that means." Alara stared straight ahead, her hands clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "I do not know what you are talking about." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Kieran's hand covered hers, his touch gentle despite the strength she could feel coiled beneath his skin. "You felt the mate bond. I felt it too. Which should be impossible because according to every law and custom of our people, I am already mated." The words hit her like a physical blow. Alara turned to stare at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, that this was some cruel test. But his expression was serious, almost grim, and she could see the conflict warring in his eyes. "You are mated," she repeated numbly. "You have a queen." Kieran's jaw tightened. "I have a political arrangement. Celine Nightshade and I were bonded 3 years ago to unite the northern and southern territories. It was necessary to prevent civil war. She is beautiful, intelligent, and completely capable as a ruler. But we have never felt the mate bond. I thought perhaps we were simply not fated, that duty had to be enough." He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was probably unconscious, but that made her skin burn everywhere he touched. "Then I touched you, and everything I thought I knew became a lie. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Alara pulled her hand away, needing distance even as every instinct screamed at her to lean closer, to let him touch her, to explore whatever this impossible connection between them meant. "This cannot happen," she said, her voice shaking. "You are the Alpha King. You have responsibilities, a kingdom, a wife, and I am nobody. An Omega without a wolf who apparently has a bloodline that does not make any sense. We barely know each other. This is insane." Kieran leaned back in his seat, but his eyes never left her face. "Insane," he agreed. "Impossible. Catastrophic for political stability, and completely, undeniably real." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, more vulnerable than a king should ever appear. The mate bond is not something that can be ignored or denied. It will only grow stronger. And if Celine discovers it before we understand what is happening, the consequences could tear the kingdom apart. The vehicle wound through mountain roads, leaving the packlands behind and climbing toward the royal compound that sat at the highest peak, a fortress built to withstand siege and protected by wards older than memory. Alara watched the landscape pass and tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. She had gone from invisible Omega to the center of a political catastrophe, had discovered she apparently had royal blood, had gained a legendary war creature as a guardian, and had felt a mate bond with the one lichen in the entire kingdom who was absolutely, completely, catastrophically off limits. "I should run," she said quietly. "I should get out of this vehicle and disappear into the forest. It would be easier for everyone." Kieran's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with just enough pressure to make his point without hurting. "If you run, you will die. The war creatures are awakening because something is coming. Something bad enough. That the old magic is responding. You have enemies you do not even know about yet. And you have me. Which means you have the protection of the crown whether either of us wants it or not." He released her wrist but did not move away. "You are not running. You are not disappearing. You are going to stay at the compound where I can keep you safe. while we figure out what you are and why that creature chose you, and what in the name of the first lichens we are supposed to do about this bond that should not exist, but does. Ilara wanted to argue, wanted to insist she did not need protection, did not want his help, did not want any part of this nightmare. But the war creature at her feet pressed its head against her leg, a reminder that none of this was her choice anymore. Fate, or destiny, or whatever cruel force governed the universe had decided to reach down and destroy her comfortable invisibility, and there was no going back. "Fine," she said, the word coming out harder than she intended. "I will stay, I will cooperate, but I am not your responsibility, and I am not going to be the reason your kingdom falls apart. We figure out what this means. We deal with whatever is coming, and then I go back to my life." Kieran's expression was unreadable. "If you think there is any possibility of going back after this, then you understand less than I thought." The compound appeared as they crested the final rise, a sprawling structure of stone and wood that looked like it had grown from the mountain itself. Guards lined the walls, their eyes glowing gold in the fading light, weapons ready. The gates opened smoothly, and they drove through into a courtyard so large it could have fit the entire pack she had just left with room to spare. Lichens moved with purpose between buildings, warriors and servants and nobles, all going about the business of running a kingdom. None of them paid attention to the vehicle until Ilara stepped out, and the war creature followed, returning to its massive armored form the moment its paws touched stone. Then everything stopped. Warriors reached for weapons. Servants froze mid-step. And from the main entrance of the central building, a woman emerged who was so beautiful it almost hurt to look at her. Tall, elegant, with hair like midnight and eyes the color of frozen lakes, wearing a gown that probably cost more than Ilara had earned in her entire life. Queen Selene Nightshade. And she was staring at the war creature with an expression of shock that slowly, inevitably shifted to Ilara herself. "Kieran," Selene said, her voice cool and controlled despite the circumstances. "You left this morning to perform a protection ritual. You return with a war creature and an Omega who smells like she has never shifted a day in her life. Would you care to explain?" Kieran moved to stand beside Ilara, a positioning that was protective and possessive in equal measure, and she saw Selene's eyes narrow as she registered it. "There have been developments," Kieran said carefully. "Developments that require privacy to discuss. Ilara will be staying in the East Wing as our guest until we understand the full situation." Selene's gaze moved between them, and Ilara saw the exact moment the Queen understood. The air between them went cold, frost literally forming on the stone at Selene's feet as her power leaked out in response to her emotions. "Guest," she repeated, the word dripping with disbelief. "You bring another woman into our home, with a war creature bowing to her, and you expect me to simply accept it." "I expect you to trust that I would not do this without reason," Kieran said, his voice hardening with authority. "And I expect you to remember that you are queen of these territories because I made you queen, not the other way around." It was brutal, a reminder of power dynamics that made Ilara flinch even though it was not directed at her. Selene's expression went blank, carefully controlled rage replacing shock. "Of course, my king. I will have the servants prepare the East Wing. I assume you will be joining me for dinner to discuss these developments." The emphasis on the word made it clear there would be a reckoning, and soon. Kieran nodded once. "After I have settled our guest and ensured she has everything she needs." Selene's smile was sharp enough to cut. "How thoughtful of you." She turned on her heel and disappeared back into the building, but the frost remained on the ground, a warning and a promise. Ilara felt sick. "I should not be here," she whispered. "This is wrong. You have a life, a marriage, and I am destroying it by existing." Kieran touched her elbow, guiding her toward a side entrance away from the staring crowd. My marriage was a political arrangement that has always had cracks. You are not destroying anything. You are simply revealing what was already broken. The war creature followed them inside, its claws clicking on marble floors, its presence a reminder that this was all real, all happening, all completely impossible to take back. The East Wing was beautiful in a way that made Alara feel even more out of place. High ceilings, tall windows that looked out over valleys and forests, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than somewhere people actually lived. A servant showed her to a suite of rooms that were larger than the entire house she had grown up in, complete with a bedroom, sitting room, and bathroom that had a tub big enough to swim in. "You will be safe here," Kieran said, standing in the doorway as if afraid to come further inside, as if proximity to her was dangerous. "Guards will be posted outside. No one will disturb you without permission. If you need anything at all, you only have to ask." Alara set her worn bag down on a chair that probably cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. The contrast so absurd she almost laughed. "What I need is to understand what is happening to me, what I am, why that creature chose me, and what we are supposed to do about this bond that I can feel getting stronger every second you stand there." Kieran's hands flexed at his sides, and she could see the effort it took him to maintain control. "I have people researching your bloodline, scholars who know the old histories, who can trace family lines back through the centuries. We will find answers." He paused, then added more quietly, "As for the bond, I do not know. It has never happened before that I know of. A lichen cannot have two mates. It is supposed to be impossible." "Everything about me seems to be impossible," Alara said bitterly. "No wolf, royal blood I never knew about, a war creature that treats me like I am precious, and a mate bond with a married king. I think I would prefer to go back to being invisible." Kieran finally stepped into the room, closing the distance between them until he was close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, could see the flecks of amber in his golden eyes. "I am glad you are not invisible anymore," he said, his voice low and rough. "Even though it complicates everything, even though it may destroy everything I have built, I am glad I can see you now." He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then stopped himself, his jaw clenching with the effort of restraint. "I need to go deal with Selene. Try to minimize the damage, but I will send someone to sit with you if you do not want to be alone." "I am used to being alone," Alara said. "But even—" As she spoke, the war creature pushed its massive head under her hand, demanding attention. Though apparently not anymore. Kieran's lips quirked in something that was almost a smile. "That creature is proof that you were never meant to be alone, that you are meant for something greater than any of us understood." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Whatever happens, whatever we discover, I want you to know that I will protect you, even if it costs me everything. You are mine too. Protect now, whether that bond makes sense or not." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison sentence or a promise, or perhaps both. Alara sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short gasps as everything finally crashed over her. The war creature climbed up beside her, impossibly careful despite its size, and curled around her like a shield made of armor and ancient magic. She buried her face in her hands, and tried not to cry, tried not to think about how thoroughly her life had been destroyed in the span of hours, tried not to feel the pull of the mate bond dragging her toward a man she could never have. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Somewhere in the compound, she could hear raised voices, a man and a woman arguing with the kind of passion that came from years of accumulated resentment. Kieran and Selene, tearing each other apart over an Omega who should never have mattered. The war creature rumbled, a sound that was meant to be comforting, but that only reminded her of the impossible situation she had been thrust into. She reached out and touched its armored head, feeling warmth beneath the cold metal, feeling something alive and aware and fiercely devoted to her for reasons she still did not understand. "What am I?" she whispered to the creature. "What am I really?" It did not answer, of course, but its silver eyes glowed, brighter, and somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been sleeping her entire life began to stir, a presence that felt like power and danger and potential all wrapped together. The creature felt it too. Its head lifted, its entire body going still with attention, with anticipation. "No," Alara said firmly, pressing her hand against her sternum where that presence coiled. "Not yet. I am not ready." But ready or not, something was waking inside her, and she had the terrible certainty that, when it finally emerged, nothing would ever be the same again. The door burst open without warning, and Alara jumped to her feet, the war creature leaping in front of her with a snarl that shook the windows. But it was just a young woman, small and fierce-looking, with short dark hair and eyes that flickered between human brown and wolf gold. "Sorry," the woman said, holding up her hands in a gesture of peace that would have been more effective if she had not been grinning like this was all a wonderful adventure. "Did not mean to startle you. King's orders. I am supposed to stay with you, keep you company, make sure you do not do anything stupid like try to run or throw yourself off a balcony, or whatever dramatic thing might occur to a newly discovered royal who has no idea what she is doing." Alara stared at her. "Who are you?" The woman bowed with exaggerated formality. "Lysa Blackwood, head of the King's Guard, occasionally a massive pain in his ass, and currently your babysitter. Because apparently you are important and also possibly about to cause a civil war." She straightened, her expression turning more serious. "Also, I am Kieran's sister, which means I have absolutely no problem telling you if you are making a mistake or if he is being an idiot, which in this case he might be, but the jury is still out." Alara did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Your brother is mated to the Queen. I am an Omega with no wolf. This is never going to work." Lisa stepped into the room, moving around the war creature with the casual confidence of someone who had faced down worse. "My brother is married to a woman he respects, but does not love in a political arrangement that has kept the kingdom stable, but not happy. You are an Omega who apparently has royal blood and commands war creatures, which makes you far more important than you realize. And the mate bond does not care about politics or convenience or what makes sense." She flopped down onto a chaise lounge that probably cost more than Alara's entire village, and looked at her with eyes that were far too knowing. "So here is what is going to happen. You are going to stop thinking about running. You are going to let us figure out your bloodline. You are going to learn to control whatever power is waking up inside you, because I can smell it from here and it smells old and dangerous. And you are going to survive the storm that is about to hit this compound, when Selene realizes that her position as queen is no longer as secure as she thought." Alara shook her head. "I do not want to take her position. I do not want any of this." Lisa's smile was sharp. "Want has nothing to do with it. You felt the mate bond. So did Kieran. And mate bonds do not go away just because they are inconvenient. Trust me, I have seen it before. The only question is how much blood gets spilled before everyone accepts what cannot be changed." The war creature settled back down, apparently deciding Lisa was not a threat, though its eyes remained trained on the door as if expecting more unwelcome visitors. Alara crossed to the window and looked out over the compound, at the lights beginning to glow in the gathering darkness, at the warriors patrolling the walls, at a kingdom she never asked to be part of. "Tell me about the royal bloodline," she said quietly. "Tell me why that creature recognized me when I have lived my entire life believing I was nothing." Lisa was quiet for a moment, a seriousness settling over her that aged her beyond her years. The first Alpha had 3 children, 2 sons who founded the major pack lines, and a daughter who was said to be the most powerful of them all. But she refused to take the throne, refused to mate with any of the political choices offered to her. Instead, she bonded with a warrior from the lower ranks, someone she chose for love rather than power. Her father was furious. He stripped her of her titles, her name, her place in the royal family. He told her that if she wanted to marry beneath her station, she could live beneath her station. She took the name Frost for the warrior she loved and disappeared into the lower packs, and over time, people forgot she had ever existed. Her line was thought to have died out centuries ago. Lissa turned to look at Alara directly. But if you are Frost, if you carry that blood, then you are not just royal. You are descended from the daughter of the first Alpha himself, which means your claim to the bloodline is potentially stronger than Kieran's. It means that War Creature did not just bow to you because you are special. It bowed because you might be its true queen. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Alara felt the presence inside her stir again, responding to something in what Lissa had said, recognizing a truth that Alara herself could not quite accept. I cannot be a queen, she said, her voice breaking on the word. I do not know how to lead. I do not know how to fight. I have spent my entire life being invisible, being nothing. You cannot turn nothing into royalty just because of blood. Lissa stood and crossed to stand beside her at the window. Blood is only part of it. Power is another part. Courage is another. And you have already shown more courage than you realize just by surviving in a pack that treated you as disposable, while something inside you slept and waited for the right moment to wake. Before Alara could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the compound. A wailing siren that made her blood run cold. The war creature was on its feet instantly, positioning itself between her and the door, its armor shifting and hardening as if preparing for battle. Lissa had already shifted halfway to her wolf, her body elongating, fur rippling across her skin. Stay here, she commanded, her voice distorted by the change. Do not leave this room. Do not open that door for anyone except Kieran or me. Then she was gone, a wolf the size of a small horse racing down the corridor toward whatever threat had triggered the alarms. Alara pressed herself against the window, searching the grounds for some indication of what was happening. She saw warriors flooding the courtyard, weapons drawn, formations snapping into place with military precision. She saw the gates beginning to close, massive metal barriers that could withstand a siege. And she saw them. Shapes moving at the tree line beyond the compound walls, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were not lichens. They were not anything natural. They looked like wolves, but wrong, corrupted. Their bodies too long, their joints bending at angles that should have been impossible. Their eyes glowed red instead of gold, and where they stepped, the ground withered and died, plants blackening and crumbling to ash. The Shadowlands creatures. They had come here, to the heart of the kingdom, in numbers that should not have been possible. The war beside her was vibrating with barely contained aggression, every instinct telling it to fight, to protect, to destroy anything that threatened its charge. Alara put her hand on its armored head, and the vibration stopped immediately, though the creature remained coiled and ready. I know you want to fight, she said softly, but I need you here. I need you to protect me if they breach the walls. The creature made a sound that was part growl, part whine, frustrated but obedient. Below, she saw Kieran emerge from the main building, and even from this distance, she could feel his power radiating outward like a physical force. He shifted mid-stride, his wolf form massive and black as midnight, his eyes blazing gold. He leaped onto the wall beside his warriors and threw his head back in a howl that was both challenge and command, a sound that made every lichen in the compound respond in kind. The creatures at the tree line answered with a sound that was nothing like a howl, a shrieking, chittering noise that made Alara's skin crawl and her ears ring. Then, they attacked. They came in a wave of corrupted flesh and wrong joints and red eyes, throwing themselves at the walls with a frenzy that spoke of madness or desperation or both. The lichens met them with tooth and claw, and silver-edged weapons, and the sound of battle filled the night, screams and snarls, and the wet sounds of flesh tearing. Elara could not look away. She stood at the window and watched as the kingdom's defenders fought to hold the walls, watched as creatures fell and were replaced by more, watched as the ground outside the compound became slick with blood, both red and something darker, something that smoked and hissed where it touched the earth. She watched Kieran fight like the king he was, his wolf tearing through enemies with precision and power, his commands directing his warriors even in the chaos of battle. She watched Lissa fighting beside her brother, smaller but faster, her jaws crushing throats and her claws opening bellies. And she felt something inside her respond to the violence, to the danger, to the desperate need to protect these people who had taken her in, even though they did not know what she was. The presence in her chest unfurled like wings, and suddenly Elara could not breathe. Power flooded through her, so intense it felt like burning, like drowning, like being torn apart and remade in the same instant. She gasped and fell to her knees, her hands pressed against the floor, and she felt something inside her break free of chains she had not known existed. The war creature threw its head back and howled, a sound of triumph and recognition, and from somewhere impossibly deep, something answered. The ground shook, the walls trembled, and from the courtyard below, from the earth itself, more war creatures began to emerge. 5 of them, 10, 20, each one massive and armored and glowing with silver light, each one pulling itself from stone and soil as if they had been sleeping just beneath the surface for 1,000 years. They formed a line between the walls and the main building, a wall of living armor and ancient magic, and their presence alone made the corrupted creatures hesitate, their mad rush faltering. Elara's creature looked at her, and she understood. It was waiting for her command. They all were. She stood on shaking legs, her whole body humming with power that she had no idea how to control, and she walked to the window. The battle paused as every eye, lichen and creature alike, turned. Toward the east wing, toward the Omega standing in the window with silver light bleeding from her eyes. Elara opened the window, the cold night air rushing in, and she did not think about what she was doing, did not question or doubt or hesitate. She simply knew. "Protect them," she said, her voice carrying across the compound, with a resonance that should have been impossible, that sounded like multiple voices speaking in harmony. "Protect the kingdom. Destroy anything that threatens it." These war creatures responded as one, a roar that shook the foundations of the compound. And then they charged. They hit the corrupted creatures like an avalanche, like a force of nature, like divine retribution made manifest. The battle that had been desperate became a slaughter. The corrupted creatures did not stand a chance against guardians designed specifically to destroy them, and within minutes, the attack had been repelled, the surviving corrupted things fleeing back into the forest with the war creatures pursuing, hunting, ensuring none would return. Elara watched until the last creature disappeared into the trees, and then the power that had been holding her upright drained away all at once. She collapsed, her vision going dark at the edges, distantly aware of her creature rushing back to her side, of voices shouting her name, of strong arms catching her before she hit the floor. She looked up through blurred vision and saw Kieran's face, saw his eyes wide with shock and awe, and something that looked like fear. "What are you?" he whispered, and it was the same question she had asked herself, the same question no one seemed able to answer. "I do not know," she managed before the darkness took her completely, dragging her down into sleep or unconsciousness or something deeper, something older, a place where ancient voices whispered secrets in languages she almost understood. When she woke, she was in bed, the war creature curled beside her like a massive armored dog. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and she could smell food, could hear quiet conversation from the sitting room. Her body ached like she had run a marathon. Her head pounded, and her mouth tasted like copper and earth. She sat up carefully, and the war creature immediately lifted its head, its silver eyes studying her with concern. "I am okay," she told it, though she was not entirely sure that was true. "What happened? How long was I unconscious?" A voice from the doorway made her turn. 2 days. It was Celine, looking immaculate as always, but with shadows under her eyes that suggested she had not slept much. The queen walked into the room with the kind of grace that seemed effortless, and she pulled a chair close to the bed before sitting, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. "You awakened 23 war creatures, took command of them with a voice that carried power none of us have seen in centuries, saved the compound from being overrun, and then collapsed. Kieran has not left your side except when forced. The entire kingdom is talking about the Omega who commands the Guardians, and I need to speak with you before he wakes up." Alara glanced toward the sitting room and saw Kieran asleep on the couch, still in torn and bloodied clothes from the battle, his face exhausted even in sleep. "You should hate me," Alara said quietly. Celine's laugh was bitter. "I do hate you. You represent everything I have feared since the day I agreed to marry. A man who would never love me. You are his true mate, the bond I was supposed to have but never did. You have power that makes my own look like parlor tricks. And you did not even try. You just existed. And that was enough to threaten everything I have built." She paused, her fingers tracing patterns on the arm of the chair. "But I am also not a fool. I saw what you did. I saw those creatures bow to you. I saw the power you carry even though you have no idea how to use it. Yet, I saw that you could have let the compound fall, could have let the corrupted things breach the walls and destroy us all. And instead, you risked yourself to save people who have given you no reason to care about them." Celine met her eyes directly. "So I hate you, but I also respect you. And I need to know what you intend to do about my husband." The question was so direct, so brutally honest, that Alara did not know how to answer. "I do not want to take him from you," she said finally. "I do not want to destroy your marriage or your position. I just want to understand what I am, and then find a way to live with it that does not hurt anyone." Celine stood, smoothing her gown with hands that trembled slightly. "You cannot have him without hurting me. That is simply reality. The mate bond will draw you together whether you want it to or not, and eventually, you will have to choose between fighting it and destroying yourselves, or accepting it and destroying me. I am telling you this now, while we can still speak civilly, while emotions have not made us enemies. If you take him, if you accept that bond, I will not go quietly. I will fight for my position, for my crown, for everything I have sacrificed to be queen. Not because I love him, but because I have earned my place here through years of service and compromise, and swallowing my own desires for the good of the kingdom." She walked toward the door, then paused. "But if you can find a way to live with the bond, without claiming him, if you can be strong enough to walk away from what fate has offered you, then perhaps we can find a way to coexist. Perhaps there is a path forward that does not end in war." Then she was gone, leaving Alara alone with the sleeping Alpha King and the war creature, and the weight of an impossible choice. Kieran stirred a few minutes later, his eyes opening and immediately finding her, relief flooding his features. "You are awake." He was beside the bed in seconds, his hands reaching for her, but stopping just short of touching, as if afraid contact would break something fragile. "How do you feel?" Alara considered lying, considered saying she was fine, but she was too tired for deception. "Like I am trapped in someone else's life. Like I went to sleep as one person and woke up as someone completely different. Like I have power I do not understand, and responsibilities I never wanted." She looked at him, at this man who was supposed to be hers but could not be, and felt the mate bond pulling at her like a physical ache. Your wife came to see me. She was very clear about the situation. Kieran's jaw tightened. Celine had no right to pressure you when you are recovering. Alara shook her head. She had every right. She is your wife. She is the queen. And I am the disruption that threatens to destroy everything she has built. She was not cruel. She was honest. And I appreciate that more than kindness would have offered. She pushed herself further upright, ignoring the way her muscles protested. Tell me what you have learned about my bloodline. Tell me why those creatures obey me. Tell me what I am supposed to do with power that I should not have. Kieran settled into the chair Celine had vacated, and for a moment, he just looked exhausted, the weight of kingship visible in every line of his face. You are the last living descendant of Isadora Frost, daughter of the first Alpha. Your bloodline is older and arguably stronger than my own. The war. Creatures were created by the first Alpha specifically to protect his daughter and her descendants because she was the most powerful of his children, the one he feared would be targeted by his enemies. He ran a hand through his hair. When you awakened them, you proved beyond any doubt that you carry her blood, which means you have claim to the throne that predates any political arrangement or marriage bond, which means, legally and by blood right, you could challenge for the crown. Alara stared at him in horror. I do not want the crown. I do not want any of this. Kieran leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes meeting hers with uncomfortable intensity. What you want may not matter. The war creatures have chosen you. The old magic recognizes you. And there are going to be factions in the kingdom who see you as either the salvation we need or a threat that must be eliminated. I cannot keep you safe if you are just a guest in the compound. I cannot protect you from political rivals if you have no position. But if you accept your bloodline, if you claim your heritage, then you become untouchable. No one would dare move against the descendant of the first Alpha who commands the war creatures. Alara felt trapped, walls closing in from every direction. If I claim my heritage, I destroy your marriage. If I reject it, I become a target. There is no path forward that does not end in pain for someone. Kieran's hand finally bridged the distance between them. His fingers wrapping around hers, and the mate bond surged with warmth and certainty, and a sense of rightness that was almost painful. I know. Believe me, I have spent 2 days thinking of nothing else while you slept. I have responsibilities to Celine, to the political alliance our marriage represents, to the stability of the kingdom. But I also have you, impossible and inconvenient and completely undeniable. And I do not know how to choose between duty and destiny when both feel equally important. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The war creature pushed its head under their joined hands, a reminder of its presence, a reminder that some choices had already been made whether they liked it or not. Alara looked at the creature, at Kieran, at the sunlight streaming through windows in a castle she never imagined being part of, and she felt something settle inside her. A decision. Forming that was not what anyone wanted, but might be what they all needed. I will claim my heritage, she said slowly, the words feeling heavy and irrevocable. I will learn to use these powers. I will become what the war creatures need me to be. But I will not challenge for your crown. I will not destroy your marriage. And I will not act on this bond between us, no matter how much it hurts. She pulled her hand from his, needing the distance even though it felt like tearing something vital. You stay with Celine. You maintain the political alliance. You rule as you have been ruling, and I will find a place in this kingdom that does not threaten what you have built. We can be allies. We can be friends. But we cannot be mates. Kieran looked like she had struck him, pain and anger and frustration warring in his expression. You think you can just ignore what we feel? You think the bond will simply disappear if we do not acknowledge it? Alara met his eyes steadily, even though tears were threatening. No, I think it will hurt every day for the rest of our lives. I think we will both spend every moment fighting the urge to be together. But I also think it is the only choice that does not destroy innocent people in the process. She stood, needing to move, needing action to keep from breaking down. Show me how to control these powers. Teach me what I need to know to survive in this world I have been thrown into. And then let me find a way to live with what I am that does not require anyone else to suffer for it. Kieran rose as well, and for a moment they stood facing each other. Close enough to touch but not touching, the mate bond stretched taut between them like a string ready to snap. "I will teach you," he said, his voice rough. "I will give you everything you need to become what you are meant to be. But do not ask me to stop wanting you. Do not ask me to stop feeling what fate has decided we should feel. I will respect your choice. I will honor your decision. But I will not pretend it does not destroy me." Then he turned and left, and Alara sank back onto the bed, her whole body shaking with the effort of maintaining control. The war creature curled around her, offering comfort the only way it knew how, and she buried her face in its armored shoulder, and finally let herself cry for everything she had lost and everything she could never have. The days that followed fell into a brutal routine. Kieran sent trainers to teach her how to fight, scholars to educate her on lichen history and politics, and Lysa to keep her company and make sure she did not do anything stupid. Alara threw herself into learning with desperate focus, needing the distraction, needing to exhaust herself so completely that she fell asleep without lying awake, thinking about gold eyes and impossible choices. She learned that her power came from the same source as the war creatures, from the ancient magic that the first lichens had woven into the foundation of their kingdom. She learned that she could call the creatures to her with a thought, could command them with a word, could feel their presence like a constant hum at the edge of her awareness. She learned to fight in human form, and then, shockingly, she learned that she did have a wolf after all. It had simply been sleeping so deeply that even she had not known it existed. When it finally emerged during a particularly intense training session, it was silver and white, smaller than the warriors. Wolves, but faster, more graceful, and its eyes glowed with the same silver light as the war creatures. Lysa had stared at it for a full minute before laughing in delight. A silver wolf, of course. That is the color of the royal line, the mark of the first alpha's blood. You could not be subtle if you tried. Alara learned to shift, to run, to hunt, to embrace the wolf she had been denied her entire life. And every new discovery, every new skill, every proof of her heritage made her feel more powerful and more trapped in equal measure. She saw Kieran every day during training, watched him work with his warriors, heard him make decisions that affected thousands of lives, and every time their eyes met across a courtyard, or a training ground, or a council room, the mate bond flared with painful intensity, a reminder of what they were denying themselves. Celine was present for council meetings, always composed, always intelligent, always the perfect queen. She and Alara maintained a careful distance, polite when they had to interact, but neither pretending they were friends or that the situation was anything but untenable. 3 weeks after she had awakened, 3 weeks of training and learning, and carefully maintained distance from Kieran, the scouts brought news that changed everything. The corrupted creatures were not random attacks. They were being led by someone, coordinated, directed toward specific targets. And they were massing at the border in numbers that suggested not raids, but invasion. The kingdom was going to war, and suddenly personal feelings and mate bonds and political marriages seemed trivial compared to survival. Kieran called a council of war, gathering his best warriors, his advisors, and for the first time, Ilara herself as the commander of the war creatures. She walked into the council room wearing leather armor that Lysa had insisted she needed, her silver wolf close to the surface, the war creature's presence humming through her. Consciousness. Every eye turned to her as she entered, assessing, judging, some with respect and some with resentment. She took the seat Kieran indicated, directly across from him at the war table, and met his eyes as an equal for the first time. "Tell us what we face," Kieran commanded, and the head scout began detailing the enemy forces, the numbers, the positions, the impossible odds. They were outnumbered 5-1, possibly worse. The corrupted creatures were stronger than expected, organized in ways that suggested intelligence behind them. And they had something new, something the scouts called shadow wolves, creatures that seemed to be lichens but twisted, corrupted, turned into weapons against their own kind. "We cannot defeat them in open battle," the war chief said bluntly. "We do not have the numbers. We would need 10 times the warriors we have, or—" He glanced at Alara, the implication clear. "Or we need the war creatures. All of them. Not just the ones you awakened, but every guardian that sleeps beneath our lands." Alara felt the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. How many war creatures exist? The scholar who had been teaching her history cleared his throat. According to the old texts, the first Alpha created 100 war creatures. 23 have awakened to serve you. The rest still sleep, waiting for the need to be great enough, or the blood command to be strong enough to wake them. "Can you wake them?" Kieran asked, his voice carefully neutral, his king's mask firmly in place. Alara thought about the power it had taken to wake 23, the way it had left her unconscious for 2 days, the strain it had put on her still developing abilities. "I do not know. I can try. But if I fail, if I exhaust myself attempting it, then we lose what advantage we already have." Celine spoke for the first time, her voice cool and analytical. "If we fight without the full force of the war creatures, we lose. The kingdom falls. Everyone dies. If you try to wake them and fail, we are no worse off than we already are. The choice is obvious." Alara looked at the queen, seeing calculation and pragmatism, and perhaps a tiny hint of hope that the attempt would eliminate the problem of an Omega with too much power and too strong a claim to the throne. "I will do it," Alara said, and she saw Kieran's jaw tighten, saw objection forming on his lips. "But I will do it my way, without interference, without pressure. Give me 3 days to prepare, to strengthen myself, to connect more deeply with the creatures I have already awakened. Then I will attempt to call the rest." The council argued, some wanting immediate action, others suggesting alternate strategies. But in the end, Kieran's word was law, and he gave her the 3 days she asked for. The meeting adjourned with plans for defensive positions, supply lines, civilian evacuations, all the logistics of preparing for a war they probably could not win. Alara left the council room and walked directly to the forest beyond the compound walls, the war creatures following her like an honor guard, Lissa trailing behind to ensure she did not get herself killed by doing something reckless. She walked until she found the oldest part of the forest, where trees grew so large their roots formed cathedral spaces beneath them, where the air felt thick with magic and memory. She sat at the base of an ancient oak and pressed her palms to the earth, and she reached out with her power, searching for the presence of the sleeping war creatures. She felt them, deep and distant, like stars hidden behind clouds. She counted them carefully, methodically, 99 including herself, and the 23 already awake. 76 creatures still sleeping, still waiting, and she had to find a way to wake them all without destroying herself in the process. For 3 days, she sat in that forest and connected with the war creatures, learning their patterns, understanding their purpose, feeling the shape of the magic that bound them to her bloodline. She barely slept, barely ate, despite Lissa's increasingly creative attempts to get her to take care of herself. On the 3rd night, Kieran came to the forest himself, looking exhausted and worried, and trying very hard to hide both. "You are going to kill yourself before you even make the attempt," he said, sitting beside her without invitation. "You need rest. You need strength. You cannot do this." While you are already exhausted, Elara did not open her eyes, did not break her connection with the sleeping creatures. "If I rest, I lose the connection. If I lose the connection, I have to start over. I am so close. I can feel them listening. I just need a little more time." Kieran's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and solid, and the mate bond flared so intensely it hurt. Time is what we do not have. The enemy will move in less than a week. If you exhaust yourself before the battle even begins, we have already lost. She finally opened her eyes and looked at him, at the worry etched into his features, at the love he was trying so hard to hide for the sake of duty and honor, and all the impossible rules that kept them apart. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I am afraid that I will fail. I am afraid that I am not strong enough. I am afraid that everyone is putting their faith in me, and I am just an Omega who got lucky, who will let them all down when they need me most." Kieran's hand moved from her shoulder to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized was falling. "You are not an Omega who got lucky. You are the daughter of the first Alpha's bloodline. You command war creatures that have not been seen in 1,000 years. You have power that terrifies people who have spent their lives cultivating strength. And you are afraid, which proves you understand the weight of what you are attempting. Only fools rush into battle without fear." He leaned closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips, could see the flecks of amber in his golden eyes. "You will not fail. I know this with certainty that has nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with watching you fight for 3 weeks, to master powers that should have taken years to control. You are extraordinary, and I believe in you even if you do not believe in yourself." Elara wanted to close the distance, wanted to kiss him, wanted to give in to the bond that was screaming at her to claim him, to hell with consequences. But she had made a choice, and she would not break her own promise no matter how much it hurt. "If I do this," she said instead, "if I manage to wake all the war creatures and we somehow survive the coming battle, I need you to let me go." Kieran pulled back as if she had slapped him. "What?" Elara forced herself to continue, forced the words out even though they tasted like ash. "I cannot stay here. The mate bond gets stronger every day. Every time I see you, every time you look at me, it becomes harder to maintain distance. Eventually, I will break. Eventually, we will give in. And when we do, it will destroy your marriage, destabilize the kingdom, and hurt innocent people." She stood, needing the movement, needing to not see his face as she said this. "So, when this is over, when the war is won or lost, I am leaving. I will take the war creatures and go somewhere far from here. Somewhere I can be useful, without being destructive. And you will stay with Celine and rule your kingdom and find a way to be happy without me." Kieran was on his feet in an instant, his hands gripping her shoulders, his eyes blazing with emotion he could not contain. "You cannot ask me to let you go. You cannot ask me to live the rest of my life feeling this bond, and knowing I chose duty over my own mate. I am trying. I am trying so hard to do the right thing. But there are limits to what even a king can sacrifice." Elara put her hands over his, her fingers curling around his wrists. "You are a king. That means sacrifice is not optional. That means duty comes first, even when it breaks you. You know this. You have lived this your entire life." She stepped back, breaking contact, forcing distance between them. "Now let me finish what I started so I can save your kingdom, and then leave it behind before I destroy everything you have built." Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to rage against the impossible situation they were trapped in. But he was a king before he was anything else. And he understood duty, even when it destroyed him. 3 more hours, he said, his voice rough. Then you rest whether you are finished or not. You will not save anyone if you collapse before the battle begins. Then he was gone, disappearing into the trees, and Alara sank back to the ground and pressed her hands to the earth and reached out one more time. This time, something answered. Not one voice, but many, a chorus of awareness stirring from sleep, responding to her call, recognizing her blood. She poured everything she had into that connection, every ounce of power, every fragment of will, every desperate hope that she could be enough. The earth trembled, the trees swayed, and from the depths of the forest, from beneath stone and soil and root, the war creatures began to emerge. 1, 5, 10, 20, 50. They came in a tide of silver light and ancient armor, creatures of legend made manifest, until 76 new guardians stood in the clearing, their eyes glowing, their attention fixed on her with devotion that was absolute and terrifying. Alara looked at them, at an army she had created with nothing but blood and will and desperate need, and she felt her legs give out. Lissa caught her before she hit the ground, supporting her weight with surprising strength. "You did it," Lissa whispered, awe clear in her voice. "You actually did it. You crazy, brilliant, impossible Omega. You woke them all." Alara looked at the war creatures, at the forest full of guardians that would follow her commands without question, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had just changed the balance of power in the kingdom forever. And somewhere in the compound, Kieran would be feeling it too, would be understanding what it meant that she commanded such force, would be realizing that she had just proven beyond all doubt that her claim to the throne was stronger than his own. The battle had not even begun, and already she had won something she never wanted. 2 days later, they marched to war. The war creatures formed the vanguard, 99 guardians that struck terror into the hearts of even the bravest warriors. Behind them came the Lycan forces, thousands of warriors from all 7 packs, united under Kieran's command. Alara rode at the front beside the Alpha King, her silver wolf prowling beneath her skin, ready to emerge at a moment's notice. The enemy met them at the border, and the sight was worse than the scouts had reported. Corrupted creatures filled the valley, a sea of twisted flesh and wrong joints and red eyes that numbered in the tens of thousands. And behind them, commanding them, directing them with terrifying intelligence, were the shadow wolves. Lycans who had been taken and corrupted, their minds twisted into weapons, their loyalty perverted into service to something dark and ancient and utterly wrong. Kieran's wolf emerged, massive and black, his howl carrying command and fury in equal measure. The Lycan forces surged forward, and the war creatures charged with them, and Alara dove into the chaos with her silver wolf finally free. The battle was brutal, violent, overwhelming. The war creatures tore through the enemy like they were made for it, which of course they were, but the corrupted things kept coming, wave after wave, dying by the hundreds, but never running, never retreating, driven by something that cared nothing for survival. Alara lost track of time, lost track of everything except the next enemy, the next threat, the next moment where her teeth or claws or the war creatures under her command could make a difference. She saw Kieran fighting like the warrior king he was, saw Lissa ripping through enemies with vicious efficiency, saw warriors fall and others take their place without hesitation, and then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A shadow wolf, massive and covered in corruption, was stalking through the battlefield directly toward Kieran, who was engaged with 3 corrupted creatures and would not see it coming in time. Alara did not think. She ran, her silver wolf eating up ground with impossible speed, and she hit the shadow wolf in mid-leap with all her weight behind her. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of fur and teeth, and the creature was strong, so much stronger than she expected. trained and twisted into a weapon specifically designed to kill. Lichens. It would have ripped her throat out if the war creatures had not descended on it, tearing it apart before it could finish what it started. But there were more shadow wolves emerging from the enemy lines, dozens of them, and they were all heading toward the same target. Kieran, the Alpha King. Kill the leader, break the army. It was basic strategy, and Alara was not going to let it happen. She called the war creatures to her with a thought, pulled them into a defensive formation around the Alpha King, and together they held the line. The shadow wolves kept coming, and Alara fought with everything she had, her silver wolf and the ancient power in her blood and the war creatures that answered her every command. She did not know how long the battle lasted. Hours, days, an eternity compressed into moments of violence and desperation. But eventually, finally, something broke in the enemy forces. The corrupted creatures began to retreat, pulling back toward the Shadowlands, leaving thousands of dead behind them. The Lichens cheered, howling victory, but Alara just felt exhausted and hollow and grateful to be alive. She shifted back to human form, covered in blood and dirt and things she did not want to think about. And she looked for Kieran. He was standing in the center of the carnage, still in wolf form, his black fur matted with blood, his golden eyes scanning the field for any remaining threats. When he saw her, something in his stance changed, tension draining away, replaced by relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. He shifted back to human, and before Alara could speak, before she could maintain the distance she had promised, he crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You saved me," he said, his voice rough in her ear. "You saw the shadow wolves coming, and you saved my life." Alara wanted to pull away, wanted to maintain boundaries, but she was too tired, too overwhelmed, and he felt too right against her. "The war creatures saved you. I just commanded them." Kieran pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers. "Do not diminish what you did. Do not pretend it was not you who saw the danger, who charged in without hesitation, who risked yourself to protect me when you could have stayed safe in the back lines." Before she could argue, before she could remind him of all the reasons they could not do this, he kissed her. It was desperate and tender and full of everything they had been denying, and the mate bond sang with rightness so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She kissed him back because she was too weak to resist, too overwhelmed to maintain the walls she had built, too in love with him to keep pretending otherwise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, both covered in battle filth and looking at each other with eyes that held too much feeling, Celine's voice cut through, the moment like a blade. How touching. The queen stood 10 feet away, her own armor splattered with blood, her expression cold and controlled despite what she had just witnessed. The Alpha King and his true mate, finally giving in to what everyone has known was inevitable from the beginning. Kieran stepped away from Alara, guilt and frustration warring in his expression. "Celine." The queen held up one hand, stopping whatever explanation he was about to offer. "Save it. I am tired. I am angry. And I do not want to hear justifications for something we all knew was coming." She looked at Alara, and there was something in her eyes that was not quite hatred, but was nowhere near acceptance. "You won the war. Your creatures turned the tide. Without you, we would have lost. The kingdom would have fallen, and everyone would be dead. So you have earned gratitude, respect, and probably a place in the history books as the savior of the realm." She paused, her jaw tightening. "You have also destroyed my marriage, whether intentionally or not. So I suppose the question now is what you intend to do about it." Alara felt the weight of her earlier promise, the commitment she had made to walk away, to leave Kieran with his queen and his kingdom intact. But looking at him now, feeling the mate bond burning between them, knowing that they had just survived a war that should have killed them all. She did not know if she had the strength to keep that promise. "I said I would leave," she began, but Kieran interrupted, his voice carrying command that was pure Alpha King. "No." Everyone within earshot turned to look at him, the word carrying power that demanded obedience. "No more running. No more sacrificing yourself for some misguided notion of duty. No more pretending the mate bond can be ignored just because it is inconvenient." He turned to Celine, and there was regret in his eyes, but also certainty. "Our marriage was a political arrangement that served its purpose. It brought peace between territories. It stabilized the kingdom, and you have been an exemplary queen. But it was never real. We both know that." Celine's expression flickered, pain showing through the careful control. "Real enough that I spent 3 years trying to make it work. Real enough that I shaped my entire life around being your partner. Real enough that watching you choose her feels like being ripped apart." Kieran flinched but did not back down. "I know. And I am sorry for the pain I am causing you. But the mate bond is not something I can choose to ignore. It will destroy me if I try. And it will destroy the kingdom if the Alpha King is fighting his own instincts every day for the rest of his life." He looked at Alara, his expression softening. "She is my mate. I felt it the moment we touched. And I am choosing her, consequences and all." Celine was quiet for a long moment, emotions playing across her face too quickly to track. Then she straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and became the queen again, cold and composed and utterly in control. "Very well. I will not fight you on this. I will not create a civil war over a man who was never truly mine. But I want my freedom in return. Dissolve our marriage publicly, give me lands and title in my own right, and let me build a life that does not revolve around being your political accessory." Kieran nodded slowly. "Done. You will have everything you ask for and more. You have earned it 1,000 times over." Celine turned to Alara, and her expression was complicated, layered with resentment and respect and a bitter sort of acceptance. "Take care of him. He is frustrating and stubborn, and carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, even when he does not have to. And despite everything, despite the fact that I hate you for existing, he deserves to be happy." Then she walked away, her back straight, her dignity intact, leaving behind a marriage that had never been love, but had been partnership. And Alara felt guilt and gratitude in equal measure. Kieran pulled her close again, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she would disappear. "Stay," he whispered against her hair. "Stay and be my mate. Stay and help me rule. Stay and be what you were always meant to be." Alara closed her eyes and let herself lean into him, let herself feel the bond settling into place, let herself accept what fate had decided. "I will stay, but not as your queen. I cannot take Celine's place. I do not know how to rule." Kieran pulled back to look at her, his expression firm. "Then you will learn. Just as you learned to fight, to shift, to command the war creatures. You are the daughter of the first Alpha's line. You have power that makes even the strongest warriors kneel. You do not get to hide anymore." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, gentle touches that were promises of more to come. "You are mine, and I am yours. And together, we will figure out how to lead this kingdom through whatever comes next." The war creatures gathered around them, 99 guardians forming a circle of protection and devotion, their silver eyes glowing with approval. And Alara looked at the battlefield, at the warriors celebrating survival, at the man who held her like she was precious, and she finally let herself accept that she was not invisible anymore. She was not nothing. She was Alara Frost, last daughter of the royal bloodline, commander of the war creatures, and mate to the Alpha King. And terrifying as that was, as impossible as it seemed, it was also right in a way nothing else had ever been. The story did not end there, of course. There were political complications to navigate, territories to rebuild, the mystery of what had corrupted the Shadow Wolves to unravel. But standing in the aftermath of battle, covered in blood, and holding the man fate had chosen for her, Alara finally understood what it meant to be seen, to be valued, to be loved not in spite of what she was but because of it. She stood silent no more. She stood beside the Alpha King, commanded creatures of legend, and carried power that would reshape the kingdom. And when the war creatures lowered their heads before her in unified devotion, she no longer questioned why. She simply accepted it, accepted herself, accepted the destiny she had spent her whole life running from. Because she was not an Omega without a wolf. She was the Silver Wolf of legend, the guardian of guardians, the one the ancient magic had been waiting for, and her story, her real story, was only just beginning.